An important property of transition metals is that they show variable oxidation states. For example, commonly iron can have an oxidation state of +2 or +3, and it can go higher. And manganese is commonly +2, +4 or +7, but it can also be +3, +5 and +6. Having the ability to change oxidation state is one of the features of transition metals that allows them to act as some types of catalyst. Under the right conditions, transition metals readily undergo redox reactions, where one substance is being reduced and the other is being oxidized. Remember, reduction is the gain of electrons and oxidation is the loss of electrons. For example, in the presence of certain reducing agents, transition metals can readily be reduced to lower oxidation states, and excess zinc is a very effective reducing agent. For instance, if we take a look at these two half equations here, where you can see we've got the oxidizing agents on the left-hand side ready to gain electrons, these half equations are equilibria, which means they are reversible. And on the right-hand side, we have the reducing agents. If we take a look at the electrode potentials for these two half equations, we can see that the larger electrode potential is for the iron 3+, our transition metal, which means this is the half equation that will go in the forwards direction, in the direction of being reduced. And the zinc half equation with the smaller electrode potential will go in the reverse direction, losing electrons. So the reducing agent, the zinc, is being oxidized. Overall, then, when we combine these two half equations, we need to double the iron half equation and then combine them together, remove the electrons, and we can see that this is the overall equation. And the E cell, or sometimes called the EMF, would be 1.53 volts. Transition metals show variable oxidation states, and in chemical reactions they can move between these oxidation states by gaining or losing electrons. Redox potentials indicate how easily an ion is reduced, and they follow the same principles as standard electrode potentials, namely 298 Kelvin temperature, 100 kilopascals pressure for gases, and 1 mole per decimeter cubed concentration for solutions. They are slightly different though, because where the standard electrode potentials are measured for metal aqua ions, the redox potential for a transition metal changing from a higher to lower oxidation state is influenced by the pH and the ligand. And some ligands form stronger coordinate bonds than water would in the metal aqua ion. Therefore, the redox potentials can be different to electrode potentials. In general, redox potentials are larger in acidic conditions, since hydrogen ions are often required for reduction. And you can see that this is the case here for this dichromate ion being reduced and turning into the chromium 3+ ion. You can see that there are hydrogen ions on the left-hand side of the equation, which means that their role is involved in this reduction of the dichromate ion. And so adding acid will decrease the pH and it will increase the hydrogen ion concentration. And so the equilibrium will shift to the right-hand side, and so there will be a larger redox potential in this situation for this low pH. In contrast, any added base would react with the hydrogen ions, thus decreasing the hydrogen ion concentration, and the equilibrium would shift to the left, and the redox potential would decrease. A common example of transition metals showing variable oxidation states is vanadium. In an experiment, you can reduce vanadium by reacting it with zinc in acidic solution. To do this, you would take a solution containing the vanadate 5 ion, for instance NH4VO3, and then you would add zinc to this solution. And the zinc metal would be oxidized, it would lose electrons and produce these electrons, which can then be gained by the vanadium. Initially, vanadium is an oxidation state of +5, which gives it its distinctive yellow colour. But then it can gain electrons in acidic solution and become a blue solution of VO2+, which has vanadium in a +4 oxidation state. But actually it doesn't end there. This vanadium in the +4 oxidation state can gain more electrons in acidic solution and become vanadium +3, which is a green coloured solution. And then finally that vanadium +3 can gain a further electron and become a vanadium with an oxidation state of +2, which is a violet coloured solution. You need to be able to combine the zinc half equation with any of these three vanadium half equations, or with more than one of these vanadium half equations at once. For instance, what is the half equation for vanadium +5 turning into vanadium +2? To do this, you start with the VO3 1- and we end with the V2+. To balance for oxygen atoms, we need to add 3 water molecules to the right-hand side, and then to balance for hydrogen, we add 6H+ to the left-hand side. And then to balance for charge, we need to add 3 electrons to the left-hand side. A number of these reduction half equations take place in acidic solution. You can tell that from the presence of the hydrogen ions. And the selection of acid is very important. For redox reactions, you will typically acidify with sulfuric acid. And this is because the sulfate ion is a stable ion and won't act as an oxidizing agent under these conditions, and so won't interfere with the redox process. Unlike with hydrochloric acid, where the chloride ion can act as a reducing agent and it can give electrons to potential oxidizing agents. And then nitric acid contains the nitrate ion, and the nitrate ion is a strong oxidizing agent and it can take electrons from other chemicals. And so sulfuric acid is definitely preferred. Like acid-base titrations, redox titrations are carried out to determine an unknown concentration of a solution. In exam questions, this is often part of a larger goal. You might be trying to find out the mass of iron in an iron tablet, or the percentage of iron in steel, or even the MR of hydrated ammonium iron 2 sulfate. You won't do all of these practical investigations during your lessons, so it's important to practice lots of exam questions to explore as many of these as possible. To carry out this titration, you would first transfer 25 cm³ of an iron 2+ solution into a conical flask using a pipette. And then into the burette you would place the pink potassium manganate 7 solution. This chemical is oxidizing and harmful, and so whilst filling up this burette, you would make sure that you fill it up below eye level to prevent any solution splashing into your eyes or face. Potassium manganate 7 is a strong oxidizing agent, and during this titration it gains electrons and becomes manganese 2+ ions, and the colour changes from pale pink to colourless, and so this means that no indicator is needed for the titration. The iron 2+ solution is therefore oxidized and becomes iron 3+ by losing electrons. And in terms of the half equations, you can see that we've got the beginnings of half equations here. The manganate 7 equation needs to have 4 water molecules added to the right-hand side, and then 8 hydrogen ions added to the left-hand side. And then to balance for charge, we need to add 5 electrons to the left-hand side. The iron half equation just needs 1 electron adding to the right-hand side. It's important that you remember these half equations, or that you remember how to work these half equations out if you know the crucial chemicals on each side for the manganese and the iron. When you combine these two half equations, we need to multiply the iron half equation by 5, add the two equations together, and simplify out by removing the electrons. And this gives us the overall redox equation that I'm showing here, and you can see that the iron moles is 5 times larger than the manganate 7 moles, which is really important for our analysis. During the titration, the pink potassium manganate 7 of known concentration becomes decolorized when it is added to the conical flask. At the end point, it is no longer decolorized, and so the color change is from colorless in the conical flask to pale pink. After you've finished this titration and reached that endpoint, you'd note down the titer volume for potassium manganate 7 and work out an average volume needed to react with the iron 2+. And then you'd use the equation moles equals concentration times volume to work out the moles of potassium manganate 7 added to the conical flask, and then you'd use the mole ratio of 1 to 5 to work out the moles of iron 2+ that must be in that conical flask. And then, depending on the specific target of the investigation, you might follow this up by working out a mass value by using mass equals mR times moles. Redox titrations can also be carried out where potassium manganate 7 reacts with ethanedioate ions. And the overall redox equation is shown here, and it's important to note the 2 to 5 ratio that the manganate 7 and the ethanedioate ions react in. The half equations for this reaction have the ethanedioate ion turning into carbon dioxide and being oxidized. The ratio there is 1 ethanedioate to 2 carbon dioxide, and both of those carbon atoms lose 1 electron, so we need 2 electrons on the right hand side to balance this. The manganate 7 half equation is shown here. You can see the pink MnO4- is turning into Mn2+. We need 4 water molecules on the right hand side, 8 hydrogen ions on the left hand side, and 5 electrons being gained by the manganese, whilst this manganate 7 is acting as an oxidizing agent. You can see the hydrogen ions are reactants in this half equation and in the full redox equation, which is why this takes place in acidic solution. You can also see the electrons in the 2 respective half equations, and that's why the ratio is 2 to 5, because the common multiple for electrons is 10, and so the top half equation needs to be multiplied by 5, and the bottom half equation multiplied through by 2. An example of where this redox titration might be applied is to determine the MR of ethanedioic acid. To carry this experiment out, you'd dissolve a certain mass of ethanedioic acid in a beaker. This chemical is toxic, so you'd wear gloves whilst dissolving it. Perhaps you'd be given an exam question where they describe 200 milligrams as being dissolved in a beaker, and you have to remember to convert that mass into grams. And then you would dissolve it, and once fully dissolved, you'd make up a volumetric solution in a volumetric flask in some kind of volume, such as 250 cm cubed. And then you'd titrate 25 cm cubed portions of this solution in a conical flask with this manganate 7 ion from the burette, which is pink at the start. During the titration, the manganate 7 ions become decolorized, and so whilst it's pink in the burette, it would be colorless as it is added to the colorless ethanedioic acid solution, but then once all that ethanedioic acid has been used up, the color change at the endpoint would be colorless to pale pink. You would note down the titer volume added from the burette, and you'd use this value along with the concentration for the manganate ion solution to work out the moles of manganate 7 added from the burette. You would use that 2 to 5 ratio to note that there would be 2.5 times the number of moles of ethanedioate in the conical flask as you have added from the burette. And then you would also perhaps have to note that you'd only been reacting 25 cm cubed of your solution out of the total volumetric flask solution, and so you would need to factor that in by multiplying the moles of ethanedioate in the conical flask by 10 to work out the moles of ethanedioic acid in the volumetric flask, and hence in this 200 milligrams of ethanedioic acid that you'd started with. And then finally, since you know that the mass that you've used is 0.2 grams, and you know the moles by using the titration results, you can work out the MR of the ethanedioic acid by doing mass divided by moles. Sometimes redox titrations involve hydrogen peroxide. You'll usually be given the half equation for hydrogen peroxide and expected to use it along with the rest of the titration analysis. A potential goal for this titration would be to determine the concentration of hydrogen peroxide in hair bleach. The oxidation half equation for hydrogen peroxide has H2O2, with the oxidation state of oxygen being -1, turning it into O2 with the oxidation state of 0 for oxygen, plus 2 hydrogen ions, plus 2 electrons, showing that each oxygen atom is losing 1 electron to a total of 2. To do this titration, you'd first dissolve a sample of hair bleach in a volumetric flask and make the volume up to 250 cm cubed, and a 25 cm cubed portion of this would be removed with a pipette and placed into a conical flask and acidified, and then you'd be ready to titrate this with the potassium manganate 7. The half equation for the manganate 7 has got 5 electrons being gained in the presence of hydrogen ions, which is why we acidified the conical flask before starting the titration. And we produce Mn2 plus and 4 H2O. Since 5 electrons are being gained by the manganate 7 and 2 lost by the hydrogen peroxide, we need to multiply those half equations by 2 for the manganate 7 and 5 for the hydrogen peroxide. When we combine those multiplied half equations, we get this overall redox equation that I'm showing here. And then one important thing to note is I've got hydrogen ions on both the reactant side and the product side. So it's really important that we simplify this by removing those 10 hydrogen ions from the product side, and we remove 10 of those 16 hydrogen ions from the reactant side to give us an overall redox equation that I'm showing here, showing that we need a 5 in front of the hydrogen peroxide and a 2 in front of the manganate 7, and those hydrogen ions are again showing that the solution needs to be acidified. Whilst we do the titration, the pink potassium manganate 7 is decolorized as we add it from the burette and swirl the reacting mixture, but at the end point the colour changes from colourless to pale pink because a tiny bit of that manganate 7 is left unreacted in the conical flask, and so that means that this is again self-indicating, so no indicator need be added. Then we'd work out the mean titer volume of manganate 7, multiply it by its known concentration using moles equals concentration multiplied by volume to work out the moles of manganate 7 added from the burette. Then we'd use the mole ratio from the redox equation of 2 to 5. We'd multiply that number by 2.5 to get the moles of hydrogen peroxide present in our conical flask, and then we would multiply that by 10 to work out the moles of hydrogen peroxide present in our volumetric flask in our diluted bleach solution. And we'd follow that up with some analysis that would vary slightly depending on the goal of the question.